Who on his staff said this was a good idea? Who suggested this? Who let Donald Trump know that this conference was going on? Who was the guy in his purview that said, hey, I got an idea. Let's send Donald Trump in front of a bunch of black reporters, in front of a black crowd full of more reporters, all of whom want to ask important questions. And sending him there in and of itself caused a controversy in the convention because they didn't know if it was right to like platform him. And it became like a moral question. Now, I agree that it's okay to interview the former president of the United States. I agree that it was the right thing to interview him if you're gonna ask him good, tough questions, which from all of the noise around this, it sounds like that's what happened. But who thought this was a good idea? Who thought this was a good idea? Okay, let's watch.
Thank you.
Whoever it was, if I was on the Trump team, fire him, fire him, fire him. Maybe if it was Trump himself, then that's just Trump being a wild card. You know, you kind of have to just live with him rolling the dice every once in a while. But if it was somebody on the team, get rid of him.
How are you? Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people.
So let me throw it out there. They say an hour of your time. You can see here, right? I'll throw out a spoiler. 34-minute long video. He wasn't there for an hour. He left midway through to give you an idea of the direction of this conversation.
People did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So
that's in reference to Nick Fuentes, which was brought as a personal guest of Kanye West, who was the person that was invited by Donald Trump. And then when Nick Fuentes came, they were like, yeah, I guess come on in. I don't know if nobody on his staff recognized Nick Fuentes. I find it hard to believe no one did. Either way, he made himself, he did get in a meeting with Donald Trump on behalf of Kanye West when Donald Trump was seeking Kanye's endorsement. But then Kanye in the meeting said, actually, sir, I want your endorsement. It didn't work.
So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't
Can
think...
I just say, like, that was like 6, 7, 8 things on top of each other. So Trump's in a hard position because he kind of has to choose what to respond to or just to hand wave it all. And this is definitely a crowd that is not going to take the hand waving well, to be blunt. But I don't know if he's not aiming for the crowd. He's aiming for the people who might be watching at home. I don't know, because this is a crowd that's going to kind of inherently be hostile to him. It's a bunch of largely liberal reporters, after all. But this is a tough question to start on. Like, hey, you've been really mean to a lot of brown and black people. So that meant people didn't want you here. So why should we talk to you? My goodness.
I think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. The first question. You
My goodness, this is off to a beautiful start.
don't even say hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think
okay, so there are people in there that love him. Okay. I thought it was going to be a mostly liberal crowd, but I imagine it's mixed.
it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country. Including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs.
It seems like he's gonna do the thing like hand wave it. So he basically hand waved all of those questions and is just pivoting to a different agenda of economic items that he can say he delivered to the black community with other black people like I was about to call him Black Carson, Ben Carson. So he's pivoting away, trying to concentrate on the other issue. But that's not what she asked about. She asked about the language. She asked about how he talks about black people and black politicians, like questioning if Obama was an American, etc.
Done so much, and
I mean, like, he can. It's a semi-smart pivot. It was never gonna look good because of like how brash the pivot was, to concentrate on the economic issues, because on some of these things it's indefensible, but it is a pivot.
You know, and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money. They were.
Can you please audio balance better? Okay, I'll try to. I'll turn this down a bit then.
Stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it.
Why is he making all these complaints in public? Like, the first complaint right after the question is one thing, but now he's stacking complaint on complaint on complaint on complaint right at the start. These are things he could have, like, thrown out after in response to how the event went, but like doing it right at the start after being asked the first question when not even directly answering the question itself, pivoting away. This just looks whiny and dodgy. This doesn't look good.
With Zoom, and she's not coming.
I mean, that's my perception. I don't know. Maybe whiny and dodgy people feel represented by this.
And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working or something was wrong.
Mr. President, I would love
I think
if you
it's
can
a
answer the
very
question
nasty
on your rhetoric
question.
and why you
I have
believe that
answered
black
the
voters
question.
should trust you with another 4
I have
years.
been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act?
That's a divisive crowd response. Some of those are cheers, a few claps, but I heard a lot of oh. I think I feel like maybe a few people like, I don't know. I feel like the president who during his watch slavery ended might have a few more points on you. I mean, like, what was Donald Trump's like big like claim to fame when it came to the black community? A lot of it was jobs. For example, like the lowest black unemployment rate, but then under Joe Biden it got even lower. So now is both Joe Biden and Donald Trump better than Abraham Lincoln because of the lower black unemployment rate? Because personally, I think, you know, keeping the country together and helping to end slavery, one of the most evil institutions, I don't know. I feel like it takes a little more to compare yourself to that. But the Trumpisms, it's just so embedded that he just says these things without thinking, like, I'm the best this, I'm the best that, I'm the best this. But at some crowds, you know, saying names like that and saying you're better is just not going to play well. And this is another one. This is another one of those crowds where that's just not going to play well. Like,
For you to start off a question.
because he's following up his whininess with braggadociousness. It's like stacking Trump's worst traits on top of each other after each answer. It's oof.
An answer period, especially.
It'd be like if this would be the type of thing I would show at the start of a movie, like a 5-minute clip to kind of get the characters' different bad traits and different traits across very quickly. Like we're getting all of Trump's like worst qualities one after the other.
When you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President...
Honestly, I respect the reporter just moving on and not even like addressing it, because I feel like his response kind of speaks for itself. I don't know if she needs to like really defend herself on there, and like, with this temperament, you can kind of get the idea you have no clue how long he's even going to be on stage, so take the opportunity.
Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
Diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is.
What is this answer? It's an abbreviation. How are you gonna ask somebody to define an abbreviation? How did he think that was gonna end? Oh, FBI? Can you define FBI? Federal Bureau of Investigations. Ah, damn it! Fooled again by those dastardly abbreviations. What does it mean? Define DEI? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the idea that, you know, that if you have a more diverse employment, that it can bring an asset in and of itself through its diversity, through diversity of experience and background, etc. Like it's all. Why does he need to ask her to define it? He could just say like, I don't care. It's not something I care about, or I don't know what that is. But why like quiz her? I guess he's like, okay, but this is how Trump thinks. She started on a foot of like, here's all these bad things you said about black people, answer for it. So it was definitely not like what's your favorite Soul Train song, you know? Trying to get him on the crowd on the same side or something. So he's feeling like, I need to punch back. I need to go back. So don't let her go on the offensive. Go back on the offensive. That's just how Trump is. And so this is the response he gets. He just asks her what DEI is.
That is
Give me a
literally the
definition then.
words
Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition of
Sir,
that.
I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And
be clear,
she was always
Donald Trump did donate to her campaigns in California, like I think less than like 10 years ago. I think it was back in 2013, 2014 he was donating to her. So just like 3-4 years before he ran for president. Just throwing that out there. So yeah, he's familiar with Kamala.
always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she...
I'm sorry, go back. I must have misheard this.
Is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black
I
woman. She went to a
respect either
historically black
one.
college.
I'm sorry, but like I have no clue what he's talking about. She turned black. She now identifies black. I imagine like in certain crowds you lean into like maybe more heritage more because like the people there can relate to it. Like if I'm in West Virginia, I'm gonna talk more about my West Virginia roots and I'm gonna talk about my roots of like I don't know, like you get the idea. But I don't think there's ever been like it wasn't like we were like the whole like everybody in California was like, oh, she's the Indian politician, and out of nowhere it was like, what? She was black the whole time? I had no clue. She's just like mixed race. She's just mixed race. He maybe like when he donated to her back in like 2012 or 2013, he heard she was Indian, and then only like recently he was like, oh, she's also black, okay, and he just found out she's mixed race. But that doesn't mean like she was like hiding it. She has a Jamaican father, and like, what are the people from Jamaica are black? Like I don't. It's not like a hidden fact.
Respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe...
What is that even? What is he talking about? That she became a black person? Is this like? It's almost like a lack of object permanence, but for race. Like he didn't see the race up until then, so she wasn't that race until he noticed that she was black. Then she became black. It'd be like God, I don't know. I didn't find out my friend Jeremy was Armenian until I met him, and so he wasn't Armenian until I met him. Like what?
I
that
think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask, continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire?
I couldn't have thought of a worse way you could have answered that question. I honestly couldn't have thought of a worse way. Instead of just being like, no, she's like, she's also promoted because she's like a communist or like some other traditional Republican way of attack. He basically just like, DEI hire. I don't know if she'd be a DEI hire because I don't even know if she's black. It's just, he couldn't have, he deflected and pivoted, but he pivoted to a worse area.
As some
I really
Republicans have
don't know.
said.
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length, and we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that
Well, you
interview.
told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost.
Did we get any answered anything so far? What is this? This is Trump actually at his worst. This is Trump at his most childish. This is Trump at his most asinine. This is Trump at his most dodgy and least cooperative. This is Trump at his most whiny when put under pressure. Like, why couldn't he just answer just like, look, I've always been rough with my language. I've always been, like, he could have thought of like some combination of words to throw out there to be responsive, but he just dodged, questioned why he should be questioned in that way, and then proceed to question the racial makeup of his political opponent at the black reporter. He's running against the first black woman to be nominated for the highest office in the land. That is what he's doing right now. He is doing that right now. He's not only the oldest candidate nominated in history at the age of 78, he'll be older than Joe Biden is now by the time he would end a second term. He's running against the first black woman that's going to be nominated by a party. And while doing that, at the Black Reporters Conference that someone on his staff said he should be at for whatever reason, he decided to question if his black opponent is really black. Who thought it was a good idea to put him here? Who decided this? People talk about like Joe Biden, basement Biden. My God, basement Trump. Somebody needs to sign up to that mantra. Basement Trump when it comes to stuff like this, man. My goodness.
On us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of, in this moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming...
It's the black journalists conference. Trump. God.
A lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
Why would he repeat this mantra? It did not go well last time. He called it black jobs during the debate with Biden. It was one of the few moments where people were like stopping from cringing of trying to see Biden like get out his data points and be like, what the fuck did Trump just say? Because Trump was like lying like once every 1 to 2 minutes, right? But the black jobs thing kind of slipped out, didn't get a lot of coverage, but it got some with people asking like, what's a black job? I know Wes Moore, my governor of Maryland, he was talking about it too. And now he's going to throw it out there again? Because like, what is a black job? And I know what he's trying to get at. I think what he's saying is that there were jobs that black people had or could have, or black people working jobs. And when black people are working jobs, that's black jobs. And hey, I'm helping black jobs. Therefore, I'm getting more black people jobs. That's what he means. But when he calls it black jobs, it sounds like jobs black people do. And so then the natural next question is, what jobs do black people do? And then people start assuming some unflattering things. And so honestly, I don't even think this is something like Trump saying like, oh God, all the black jobs, all the jobs that black people do, and jobs XYZ, these are the jobs that for black people, working at Walgreens or whatever. I don't know what he would consider a black job or not. No, I think this is just Trump's lack of communication skills.
Black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has.
He's not anybody who has a job. It's black people who has a job. Now I'm more confused about what he means by by a black job. What is a black job?
That happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
And
Mr. President,
they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been
He's got a hunch, guys. And we've all learned to trust his hunches.
seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most.
I like how loose he is with numbers. It's like when he was talking about like the death data in Ukraine, he said the death data is actually 3 times larger than they talk about publicly. He's not even saying which number that is. So am I to assume that like if like we're talking about like 1.5 million are dead now? Or does he mean like UN data? Like I have no clue. He's just exaggerating for a fact. He's just so loosey-goosey with these data points that are pretty important. And then when you read online how important, like from the polling data, like how important this man is as a source of information for many Republicans, with 79% of Republicans trusting Trump as a source compared to 40% to on-the-ground journalists on the ground here in Ukraine for information about the war. And he's so loosey-goosey about this information. I mean, this is how you talk about people living in separate political realities when going to the ballot box. And how do you discourse? How do you engage politically when you live in these different realities? This is how you create these information bubbles.
By that, and Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country, and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs, and frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the millions of people that are pouring into our country. And one thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners. They're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers.
The mental institution stuff, I have no clue where this comes from. Unironically, I've looked this up before. I couldn't find anything. I'll look it up again now. But I believe this is, again, just more exaggeration for effect.
Gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you address some of the issues with black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of...
Okay, this is from last year. And it's Trump's own campaign can't find proof for his mental institutions immigration story. On at least 3 occasions over the last 2 months, former President Trump has claimed that the leaders of unnamed South American countries are deliberately emptying their insane asylums and mental institutions to send the patients to the United States as migrants. In each version of the dramatic story, Trump has claimed he recently read about a doctor at a South American mental institution who said he used to be busy, but now has no work to do because all the patients have been released into the U.S. Trump's campaign was unable to provide any evidence of the existence of a news story and a no longer busy doctor at a South American mental institution. Bizarre.
Of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same.
Sure.
It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something that bursts, and this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now.
Is it just he doesn't understand what asylum means? Like he hears that people are claiming asylum and then he thinks insane asylum, and it's just like he needs to understand linguistics a little better.
The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single black moms, when you look statistically. Yeah. How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the black community when it comes to money?
So, first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, you know, this woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it. The inflation.
What a disaster this has been so far. There hasn't been like one good, uninterrupted, clippable, like campaignable moment for him so far. It hasn't made him look whiny. And now there's like technical Gosh, man, we're like 10 minutes in. We're almost 10 minutes in. That's 33% of it done. And this is what we've gotten so far. Is he going to be able to turn this around? I don't think the questions are going to turn into rosy pictures like halfway through. But this one's like a broad one. This one's like a blank canvas. He can just talk about all the like economic goodies he wants to bring for the black community. This should be like a playground for him.
Is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class. Inflation is a disaster in our country. Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating. And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%.
Clear. Inflation right now is 2%. I think in Russia it's like 7.5. United Kingdom it's higher, in Germany it's higher. I think in all G7 countries it's higher. There was an increase of inflation post-COVID, especially after the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act, and not the Inflation Reduction Act, but like the post-COVID recovery plans, to stop us from going into a recession, into a depression, which worked, which most economists didn't think would work. So there was an inflationary period, which then has now come down with time. As the economic mess that was left for us post-COVID, as Trump was the largest deficit spending president in American history, had to be cleaned up.
10% and you can't get the money.
Look, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that inflation wasn't bad. I'm just saying that not including the context and now saying it's the worst ever in history when it's like 2% right now. Russia is 18%. No. The interest rates in Russia are 18%. And another move to try to keep the economy, But the inflation, I believe, is about 7.5 or something around that. I forget the exact number.
People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young black people, they don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money because of the cost of the money. They can't buy it because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country, and it's destroying...
What does he mean, the cost of money? Does he just mean pay and labor and the pay's not good? But if he means pay's not good and workers aren't getting paid enough, just loan cost, maybe he means loan cost. I think that might be it. Yeah, I think you're right. Probably loan cost. I just didn't know what he meant by the cost of money.
The black community probably as much
or
more than any...
What's your plan?
You know what we have to do? We have to bring down the cost of energy, and that's going to bring down the cost of inflation. This was all started with a bad energy policy by...
All of it? That's the solution to everything? I mean, under the Biden presidency, we're exporting more natural gas than at any point in American history. We're the #1 exporter in the world. #1 exporter in the world. We're exporting so much that we're doubling. We currently have contracts to more than double the amount of liquefied natural gas terminals. Doubling our capacity to export liquefied natural gas, which Europe is now consuming in mass amounts as they turn off of Russia. And we had to freeze continuing those contracts. The Biden administration did just to make sure that American energy security was secure and that we wouldn't be exporting so much product that would increase American prices at home. Like there has been a lot more contracts given on public land for drilling under the Biden administration. They've been drilling. There have been some cancellations, but in the large part, the Biden administration has not been an enemy to the oil and gas industry when it comes to contracts and actually getting the permits to do the drilling, or when it comes to the amount that they're exporting overseas, taking advantage of Russia's lack of influence in the European market anymore. I don't know what he mean. Like when he says cost of energy or like the energy market, or like what would he change about the current energy market? What would change? What would he do to change it so that Americans are getting cheaper energy?
Joe Biden, by the way, just if I might, I was running against a man named Biden. You probably saw that. And he was losing very badly in the polls. And then he had a rather bad debate. I would say it was a bad debate. I would say it was one of the worst debates in history. And his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, you know, let's keep going and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight. A prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing what you say. Let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him, and now we have to steer toward him. But ultimately, it's the same because they have bad.
The thing that gets me about this isn't like a competition based on being fair, or like what makes it so each side has a good enough chance of winning, and like that's not what democracy is about. Democracy isn't just making sure that the candidates all have a good time and they all feel like the odds weren't stacked against them. Democracy is about the public trying to choose the best leadership for the job. And if so, in the process of running for the office, one of the major parties finds out that their candidate might not be the best person to either win the job or do the job, so they decide to change because that's what the American voters want. I would say that's a political party being responsive to what the vast majority of the American public, independents, and even Democrats wanted, which was a change of who was leading the party into November. And since that change has been made, the American public has responded positively. Kamala Harris's approval rating is up. The Democrats are polling better. Kamala Harris now is polling better nationally than Donald Trump, both in a conglomerate of polls, but also in individual polls, including Fox and others, up in Pennsylvania, up in Michigan, up in Wisconsin, like only down 2 points in North Carolina in a recent YouGov poll that I saw. And so that's putting states that were no longer in play back in play. And the reason that's happening isn't because, oh, they cheated. It's because they replaced a candidate that the American public did not think was up to doing the job possibly for another 4 years, since Biden's 82 years old, and they're seeing how he is on the campaign trail. Maybe he could have been, maybe he couldn't have been. Point is that the American public had concerns, and now they have less concerns about a 59-year-old woman who's quite energetic on the campaign trail and is not, well, as the campaign is putting it, weird. Like, this isn't about making it fair for the Trump campaign that, oh, they had all their attacks ready and now they have to switch it up. Okay, tough shit. I'm sorry that the American people, from their perspective, from the perspective of the American people, having a better choice in November is a problem for you, but that just means you're going to have to be a better candidate if you want to win. That's what elections are about. Giving the American people the best choice, not the candidates an easy going.
Policy. They have policies of open borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of efficient heating.
Mr. President.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're absolutely destroying our country. But the inflation is the thing that's hurting the black worker, the black population, and every other population within our country. Inflation is the worst it's been, I think, in over 100 years. And they'll fact check it. They'll say it's only 58. Whatever it may be, they don't add all the numbers. They don't add the really bad numbers, and you can check that too. But inflation, Harris, is absolutely destroying this country and the people in our country. Yes,
Mr. President, can I ask you another question
Yes,
that is also impacting black Americans?
And that's very clear now. Good.
I'm sorry?
It's very clear. I hear you.
Okay. So Sonia Massey, Someone from Illinois, an unarmed black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity?
Ooh, what a question. Oh my gosh, this is Trump in the hot seat on stage being asked about police brutality in a room full of black reporters at the Black Reporters Conference. You know, you would think if you're going to the Black Reporters Conference, you should expect a question like this. And this is a high-profile recent instance of police violence where a veteran in their home was attacked by a police officer and shot by a police officer. Let's see what Donald Trump has to say about whether that cop who shot him should be immune. I mean, if Donald Trump says the president of the United States should be immune like a police officer from criminal liability, then that also seems to imply that he wants that for police officers as well, which he has also explicitly stated.
In your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police unions are not backing this person either.
Okay.
But again, why would...
Are they going to be charging the officer? I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago,
This would be an opportunity for him to clarify, like, I want immunity for those on the street fighting against the crack, not breaking into the homes of God-fearing veterans. Like, he could, like, find some place to make a distinction for what he means by, like, what should get immunity, what shouldn't get immunity, talking about what should be the qualifications for immunity, you know? But instead he's just like, I mean, not in this case, I guess, because that seemed bad, which isn't a great answer to a room full of reporters, right? I mean, maybe if it was just like a crowd full of his own supporters, they would all trust him, but this isn't a crowd full of his own supporters. This is a crowd of people who are going to be inherently inquisitive.
July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So can you get a little more specific back to the immunity question? Who would make those
Well, right now,
distinctions?
for the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine an innocent mistake?
You go after somebody, and it's a very close call, and it's very dangerous. And, you know, they have the policeman's life.
I think none of the specifics, as vague as possible.
Life and woman is a very difficult thing because sometimes you have less than a second to make a, you know, life and death decision. And sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
So I want to follow up really quickly. You know, I find it interesting because you do talk about reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you. Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of two people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case. That was the most difficult case. And I just won it. Now, Biden has...
To be clear, the reason they said is because he's immune. It's not that he didn't commit a crime. Is that if he did commit a crime, it doesn't matter because he's immune. That was the decision.
A similar case.
It's not a decision of like, yay, he didn't do anything wrong.
Except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't because he wasn't.
He's going to be sent down for review in an appellate court. I forget the exact process or what the follow-up is.
President at the time, and he had 50 years worth of documents, and they...
Yeah, it's getting appealed. It is getting appealed.
ruled that he was incompetent and therefore he shouldn't stand trial. And I said, isn't that something? He's incompetent and he can't stand trial, and yet he can be president. Isn't that nice?
Mr. President,
but they released him on the basis that he was incompetent. They said he had no memory and he was a nice old guy, but he had no memory, and therefore we're not going to prosecute him. I won the case, and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We covered you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over on to different topics.
I didn't notice you do any publicity on it at all. I won the case, the biggest case. This is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one where I have a hostile judge.
We have you for a limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different topics.
Excuse you. You're the one that held me up at 35 minutes, just so you understand.
If we can move on now to the state of the race, sir, I want to get...
It's just, it's not coming off well. The crowd isn't responding positively. He has some supporters in there. He got some applause earlier. He got some cheers earlier. They're just not responding well. It doesn't come off well. It just comes off as childish. I don't know what else to call it, but it just comes off as childish.
Get back to the campaign. Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate. He's had a lot of controversy lately, and I want to read you a few things that he has said in the past. He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. He's not talking here about how great it is to be a parent. He's attacking what he says are the choices people are making to not have children. Did you know that he had these views about...
This is a great question, because reportedly it was his kids, Eric and Don Jr., who are the biggest advocates in his ear for taking J.D. Vance instead of Doug Burgum, which is what reportedly Donald Trump was going to go with before. Goes to J.D. Vance, somebody who's going to be super loyal because he's deep in the MAGA movement, somebody who has roots in Ohio, so maybe he can appeal to the Midwest and try to get those states like Michigan and others that, I mean, that was at least the pitch with J.D. Vance. I don't think that's going to work. But like, I don't think he knew much about J.D. Vance. I mean, when he first endorsed J.D. Vance, he got his name wrong. So, I mean, the idea that he doesn't know anything about this, like the crazy stuff he would say on podcasts, wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. This is just, J.D. Vance has now been propped up to the national level. And so they're going to dig through every crazy thing he's ever said on a podcast. And Democrats are going to drag it out. And I mean, I've already seen a million different TikTok remixes of J.D. Vance denouncing Donald Trump, which way every way from Sunday. I think only 25% of Americans, when polled, think that J.D. Vance can fulfill the job of president. He has like a favorability rating of like 24, 26%, something around that right now. I mean, he has had like a disastrous step up to the national level. Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance, I think, based on loyalty. Maybe based on some appeal to the Midwest, but also I think because he's young. But number one, loyalty. He went on TV, said he would overturn the results of the 2020 election if he was in the position of Mike Pence. And I think after his, clashing of heads with Mike Pence during, J6 and everything around it, that's something he wants. And so I think it was a confidence pick that he could concentrate on the job of legislating on who would be most loyal when he was in the job. And so he didn't pick candidates that would have been better for both uniting his party, uniting those who are never Trumper in fashion, Nikki Haley types, people who are still voting for Nikki Haley in the primaries, like 100,000 voters here, 150,000 voters here in crucial swing states. Instead of trying to appeal to them, he just goes further down his own rabbit hole. I mean, he could have picked so many other people that could have appealed, people from swing states that matter, that are semi-popular. But no, J.D. Vance.
People who do not have children before you picked him to be your running mate, and do you agree with him?
No, I know this. He is very family.
Trump has really bad instincts when it comes to picking popular candidates. I mean, remember Doug Mastriano? That's one candidate. That was a disaster in Pennsylvania. Another one was, another disaster in Pennsylvania was Doc Hollywood, Dr. Oz, who they ran against Fetterman, who still lost even after Fetterman had a medical episode in the middle of the campaign. I mean, Kerry Lake, who's now being ran as a candidate in the Senate again in Arizona.
Family oriented. and he thinks family is a great thing. That doesn't mean he thinks that if you don't have a family, it's not. I know people with families. I know people with great families. I know people with very troubled families. And I also know people with no families. They didn't meet the right person. Things happen. You go through life, you don't meet the right person.
But he's not just talking
Excuse
about
me.
families here.
And
He also
some of
says that
those
people that don't have children should get less votes than
That's
those
all
that
right.
do.
I'm just speaking for myself.
that your
and I
campaign
think
position?
I'm speaking for him, too. He strongly believes in family. But I know people with great families. I know people with not great families that don't have a family. And the people without the family are far better. They're superior in many cases, okay? He's not saying they're not. What he's saying is that he thinks the family experience is a very important thing. It's a very good thing. But that doesn't mean that if you grow up and you grow older and you don't meet somebody that would be wonderful to meet and would have been good, that that's a bad thing. He's not saying that. My interpretation, you'll have to ask him, actually, but my interpretation is he's strongly family-oriented. But
He said that people without kids should have less political power than those with kids. The people with kids should have more political power. Their votes should have more value. It's one thing to be in favor of like child tax credits and encouraging people to raise families because that's good for the United States. It's good that we have kids and little ones, continue the civilization and whatnot. But the idea of saying that because someone has kids, that their votes inherently have more meaning, like how this is going to be on like a ranking system? Like where do veterans rank without kids next to people with kids? Do they get more because they serve the country, or do they not have kids so they still get less? Or are we gonna like have like, okay, veterans get the most vote, then we have parents, and then way at the bottom are like the childless like Arby's workers? It's silly. It's silly. Everyone gets one vote, one man, one vote. That's the way it's always worked. It's a wacky idea. It's a weird idea. And it's ideas like this that are making the weird attack stick. Because why concentrate on this when we got problems with people paying for their medicine, people not being covered by health insurance? We got problems when it comes to like a lack of worker protections, and we're concentrating on this, really?
But that doesn't mean if you don't have a family.
It's wild to think that somebody's main political issue, or one that really inspires them, because there's a lot of clips. I keep seeing clip after clip after clip of JD Vance coming out talking about this stuff. Why would somebody's main political issue be the defranchisement of people like this? It's just a weird pet issue.
There's something wrong with it.
Just
Mr.
one last
President?
point, and then we'll move on. Just one of the bedrock principles of American life is one person, one vote. Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that the position of your campaign?
Well, no, but it's not something I have ever heard before. I can tell you this. Right now you have illegal aliens coming into our country, many from prisons.
It's just a pivot straight back to the border. Everything's a pivot back to the border. Every topic, man, every topic. Trump's not going to be happy about having to defend himself for JD Vance's crazy nonsense on the campaign trail. He already has to defend his own crazy nonsense.
And many from mental institutions, and they want to give them votes. I don't think they should have votes. They came into our country illegally,
People
and
who
they're
are only
taking the vote
American
away
citizens
from
are
all
allowed
of the
to vote,
people in
sir.
this room that have been here a long time, that have worked hard, that in many cases, and you'll see.
Dylan, is there a built-in mic? So you're saying I should use my laptop built-in mic? It will be a terrible mic. Is this mic really that bad? Because I'm looking at the audio balance, and my mic is going into the red here. It's going into the yellow. It should be good enough. I think it's fine.
See this happening. If I'm not elected, you're going to see it happen. If I am, you're not going to have any.
Buy a new mic, buy me a new mic, okay? If you want Alan Nix, you can send me $250 to Dylan Burns TV, okay? DylanBurns.tv.
Problem, but you're going to see it happening a long time. You're going to see the people in this room and people outside of this room are going to be losing their jobs, the people that have come into this country illegally.
Mr. President, can we stay with just kind of the state of the race right now? Because I felt like that vice president question, candidate question was right in there with that. Yeah. So let's talk about J.D. Vance for a little bit. He's had some stumbles out of the gate. I don't know if you're hearing what we hear as reporters, but it's been a tough couple of weeks for him. Why did you choose J.D. Vance?
Why didn't I?
Why did you choose him? And I'm having a hard time hearing too.
I
know
chose him
everybody
because,
out there can, but it's
I'll
hard
tell
to
you
hear.
why. I chose him because he's a very strong believer in work and the working man and woman, and especially the working man and woman who have been treated very unfairly, because you have many of them in this room. But you have many of those people, they were treated very unfairly. They worked very hard and they were treated unfairly. He wrote the book that became a bestseller. The movie became a smash hit. He's a very smart guy.
Have they ever read Hillbilly Elegy? Because if you read Hillbilly Elegy, it is very barbed towards many of the people who would be considered the typical Trump supporter. I feel like if they read Hillbilly Elegy, they might not receive it well. I think they just kind of like assume what it's about, and he's like they assume that nobody will actually sit down and read it and be like, I don't know if this actually is very aligned with MAGA thought, but whatever.
Without the benefit of having a family that has contacts, like a father that was well connected, he got into Yale Law School. He graduated in 2 years from Ohio State, summa cum laude. I mean, you take a look at, his career has been an amazing career. He started off at a level with a difficult family situation, very difficult with the mother and the father and everything else. He ends up going to Yale Law School and was one of the top students, became the head of the Law Journal. I mean, that's an amazing thing. He's a 4-year, he was in the military with great distinction for 4 years, got out, went into business, became successful in business, very successful in business, actually, did public offerings and other things. And I have to believe in that. I mean, he's somebody that was born in a rough situation. Most of the people know that situation because it was.
I don't know what the rough situation. He hasn't explained it. He hasn't given us any. Nobody know. He shouldn't assume everybody knows what that rough. What's JD Vance? For people who don't know, JD Vance's rough situation is that his mother was like heavily addicted to opiates, right? And which he also compared Trump to. But I mean, that's another thing. Like but he hasn't explained that, and that's something he could pitch to people. Be like, hey, we know how the drug crisis has hit us. It maybe hasn't hit me, but it hit my VP pick. People do not think he can be president of the United States. He has to sell, and this is like the only thing the VP needs to be sold on, is that they could reasonably fill in the job, and they have not succeeded in doing that with JD. And like just saying that he had a tough childhood is not going to make people aw, and then like okay, he can be president. You need to be like, connect it to his, his addiction-filled background. Connect that to the working people. Connect it to people. This is not just like a bad Trump appearance because of his bad quality traits. This is like bad because I feel like Trump is making like some basic errors and assuming what people know and like just leaving information out.
Very well documented in his book. And I have a lot of respect for somebody that can get into Yale and become one of the best students in Yale, that meets a young woman at Yale who was also outstanding, and they get married, they have a beautiful family, but he had he's made himself an amazing life. He then goes to Ohio, lives in Ohio, and he had my endorsement. That helped. But he wins the Senate. He becomes a United States Senator. So he's a United States Senator. And so, Harris, like I respect you for your success, I respect people for their success.
The reason I asked the question is because the last time you and I sat and talked was the day that you were shot. We'd been together for much of that day. You left to go to Butler, Pennsylvania, and we didn't know what was next.
Yeah.
And 2 days after that,
I cannot understand your microphone.
I know it is really hard for me to understand you too.
I can understand you perfectly.
Because she's closer.
I can understand you.
I'm happy to hear that, sir.
But I can't
really
understand, Harris.
I have a few more questions.
Because of the distance, and the mics are really in lousy shape, but I cannot understand
Are you asking a question?
what you're saying.
So what I wanted to say was the last time we spoke, you said some words that were prophetic because I asked you who you wanted to choose for vice president.
Yeah.
And you said normally it really wouldn't matter what they would bring, you choose somebody that you think has a future, that sort of thing. But you said these words 3.5 hours before an attempted assassination on your life. You told me that bad things happen, Harris, And that's why this decision is important this time. Bad things happen. You said it twice. When you look at J.D. Vance, is he ready on day one?
Does he what?
Ready on day one, if he has to be.
I've always had great respect for him, and for the other candidates too. But I will say this, and I think this is well documented. Historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side, who it's going to be. And then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick. Virtually never has it mattered. Maybe Lyndon Johnson mattered for different reasons of what we're talking about, not for vote reasons, but for political reasons, other political reasons. But historically, the choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think J.D. is. I think that all of them would have been. But you're not voting that way. You're voting for the president. You're voting for me. If you like me, I'm going to win. If you don't like me, I'm not going to win.
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance question in.
That is the worst possible answer to that question. There is no culmination of words that he could have put together that could have been worse than that. He was asked if his pick for vice president, and the job of the vice president, the only job of the vice president, is to become the president if the president dies. And Donald Trump not only was recently almost assassinated, but he's also 78 years old. He is the oldest nominee for president in the history of the United States. So the idea of J.D. Vance becoming president, whoever his VP pick becoming president, is not that far out. It's not like a crazy conclusion. And when asked if he's ready, which only 25% of Americans believe, he says, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't have an impact anyway. You're voting for president. Vote for me if you like me. Not exactly a ringing endorsement of his ability to pick up the lectern of the president and guide the nation, but I agree that he probably can't. And so Trump is, again, I think Trump picked him for loyalty, not because of his proficiency to do the job. He's a very recent addition to the United States Senate. He's not experienced. I think the only other asset he gives Trump is that he's young when Trump is old.
J.D. Vance?
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance question in. To your point and to Rachel's point, he, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think, my point
but at
is
least
here.
It was said in a friendly manner.
My point is...
that's a good quip from Trump. There you go. Real connection with the crowd.
Do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what J.D. Vance is saying?
What a good, basic, very human question. Aren't you guys a little judgy? It's all just very... Get your nose fucking out of it. That's okay. That's the root of it, isn't it?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the death of a baby after the baby is born based on...
Sir,
If abortion is performed in the 9th month, overwhelmingly what we're talking about is women who are having medical complications who, due to the health of the mother, these operations are made. There's not like, oh my God, it's being born, get the hammer. That's not allowed.
Governor of Virginia,
every state in the country.
based on the governor of Virginia,
Executing a
they're
baby
allowing
in
the
every
death
state
of
in
the
the country is
baby
illegal.
after it's born. They're
It's a crime.
allowing abortion.
In Virginia, the governor's Glenn Youngkin. He's a Republican, an anti-abortion Republican. I don't know what he's talking about.
Abortions in the 8th and 9th month.
Well, Democrats have denied.
I think they're right, and I think the Republican Party is actually much less. I think I've made them much less radical, perhaps. But the Republican Party, what we're doing is bringing it back to the states where everybody wanted it. Democrats, Republicans.
Not where everybody wanted it. He keeps saying that everybody wanted it on the state level. No, in the Democratic Party, the position was that a woman's right to choose is her business. It's not the government's business, and therefore it is their privacy, and it's not the right of the government to interfere in that matter. That's a federal response. That was what they believe the policy should be everywhere. That's why to them, not only Democrats, but the majority of Americans were in favor of Roe v. Wade staying the law of the land as it was for 50, 60 years. He keeps saying this line, but it's just not true.
Republicans, liberals, conservative, everybody wanted abortion brought back. They didn't want Roe v. Wade in the federal government. They wanted it, everybody
But the
wanted
majority
it
of
back.
Americans oppose
Excuse
Roe
me.
v. Wade being overturned.
They
Multiple
don't know.
This is true. This is what she says is true.
Wanted it, everybody
But the
wanted
majority
it
of
back.
Americans oppose
Excuse
Roe
me.
v. Wade being overturned.
They
Multiple
don't know
polls have
about
showed that,
this.
sir.
Right now, they're voting. It brought it back to the states. Now, I happen to believe in the three exceptions. Ronald Reagan believed with rape, incest, life of the mother. I do. I think most people do. I think
Ronald Reagan believed in rape and incest. I don't like him more every day.
most Republicans do also. But if you take a look, right now,
That was crude. I'm sorry.
they're doing, it's an amazing thing. Out of the federal government, it's in states, and people are voting. And I will say, Ohio is, let's call it a more liberal version, has been approved. Kansas, the same thing, a little bit surprising to a lot of people. But the people are now voting, and it's taking this issue that's been going on for 52 years and has torn our country apart, and it's giving it to the people to vote on. And they're voting. And many states have already voted. Others are in the process of voting, and it's bringing it back to the people and a vote of the people. And it's not at all radical. And again, you have to follow your heart. I happen to believe in the three exceptions. Most people believe in the three exceptions. Most Republicans believe in the exceptions. But they don't want to see an abortion in the 9th month or the 8th month. Almost everybody agrees to that. And they certainly don't want to see, in the case of the governor.
Hey, why'd the mods time out the guy in chat saying, lol, who would vote for a woman? I wonder what he did. Probably some nice inquiry. He wants to ask a nice inquiry about Kamala Harris and policy.
Of Virginia, the former governor, I might add, who said, we set the baby aside and then we decide what to do. Meaning, what do? We execute the baby.
It doesn't happen. They're not like, oh, nice bit. Wait, were you supposed to be aborted? Get the screwdriver. That's not happening. It's not a thing that's happening.
That's a radical, horrible position. And some people want that. I don't want it. Most people don't.
Thank you. Can I just pivot really quickly to another question about, you brought up health, Harris. You're an active man. We see you golfing all the time. But if you win, you'll still be president at 82,
No.
which is older than Biden is right now.
But not
Would you-
mentally. Look, mentally.
Here's the question.
He's shot. But most people.
Would you consider?
Most people, I know many people in their
Yeah.
80s and their 90s that are in great shape. Some of our greatest leaders. You look at throughout the world history, the greatest leaders, some of the greatest leaders in the world were in their 80s.
But here's the question. Would you consider stepping down if you felt that your health was declining? Or would you?
Oh, absolutely.
And who would?
I think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, if I came onto a stage like this and I got
Honestly, and I'm saying this 100% genuine, Trump is the last person that would know if Trump was declining in the head.
treated
YP Goldbug, thanks for the primer.
so rudely as this woman treated
Oh my
me,
goodness.
and I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. Very rude. That wasn't a question. She
Sir,
didn't
you
ask
can
me a
answer the
question.
question.
She gave a statement. That wasn't a question.
I repeated
You
your
can answer the
statement, sir,
question.
actually.
You said you would. You would
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
to step
thought
down.
that I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think it's a great idea. And I took 2 of them and I aced them.
Well, can
got
I just-
'em. I took 2 of them. But let me ask.
Yeah.
I would like to have people running for president, and I don't mean because they're 75 or 85. I think anybody running, I'd like to do it. People say it's not constitutional. I would like to have something passed where you can do it. I think we should know. I mean, I've watched
By the way,
what's happened
Trump is
in the
like doubling down on like, hey, she said she was Indian, because this is exactly what he's doing. And so my perception of it was correct, is that he heard her say that she was Indian, didn't hear her say she was black, and so in his mind she was Indian. He later found out she was also black because she's mixed race, and then up to that point it was like, oh, so she was pretending to be Indian before? No, she was both. She can be both. It's both at the same time. Look at this. Crazy Kamala is saying she's Indian, not black. This is a big deal. Stone cold phony. She uses everybody, including her racial identity. So like saying she's using her identity as a weapon here. But I mean, like, she's Indian and black. She's asked, hey, are you Indian? Yes, I'm Indian. If she was also asked, are you black? She probably would have said, yes, I'm also black.
Last couple of years under this gentleman, and our country is a mess. We have inflation. We have the millions of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. What he has done to our country, and her too, what they've done to our country, she has been a horrible vice president. She's considered the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Don't mean to interrupt you, but would you consider taking a
The worst one, really? Out of all of them? Really? Cheney is alive. Whatever. Continuing.
cognitive test
Mr. President,
I would love to
and
do
make it public?
Well, I've already taken 2 of them, but I'll do it again.
Mr. President, how do you intend to...
I suggested, Harris, that let's take one. I said, Joe and I will go and take a cognitive test. Now, I do
Powder Road, thank you for the tier 1.
it with her, too. I would do it with her also. You know what? She failed her law exam. She didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she wouldn't pass the cognitive test.
Mr. President,
Are you saying she wouldn't pass? Just to be clear,
I'm just giving you the facts.
to be clear, you don't think
I'm
Harris
just
how do you
giving the
intend,
facts.
and
She didn't
look,
pass her bar exam, and she didn't think she would pass it, and she didn't think she was going to ever pass it. And I don't know what happened. Maybe she passed it. I
she
guess
did pass it.
There's a
She
man
did-
over
she
here.
did
I
in
think
fact
he
pass
must
it.
work. for
Mr.
her.
President, I would love to ask you about January.
I have no clue what he's talking about in reference to her bar exam. She says that she did pass the bar exam. I mean, she was the DA, so I imagine she had to pass her bar exam. I don't know how you become the DA and not pass your bar exam, so I don't know where this is coming from. Maybe she didn't pass her bar exam on the first try or something. I have no clue.
6. You've called yourself the candidate of law and order. When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely.
Sure.
You called them patriots. 140 police officers were assaulted that day. Their injuries included broken bones, at least one officer lost an eye, one had 2 cracked ribs, 2 smashed spinal discs, another had a stroke. Were the people who assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Well, let me bring it back to modern day. Like about 5 days ago, we had an attack on the Capitol, a horrible attack on the Capitol. You saw the people that were protesting and spraying these incredible monuments, bells, lions, all these magnificent limestone and granite with red paint, red spray paint that will never actually come off, especially in the limestone. It will never, I'm a builder, I know about this stuff. It'll never, you'll see it in 100 years from now. They viciously attacked our government. They fought with police.
5 tier 1 subscriptions.
Space Ferret, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs and site chat, the best place to donate at dylanburns.tv. To Front Company, Patches, H. Rundo, Adrian, and Lucarius. Thank you so much for the 5 gifted tier 1, Space Ferret. God, gotta say again, one of the best names in the entirety of site chat.
They fought with them much more openly than I saw on January 6th. What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the people in Portland that destroyed
But sir,
that
my
city?
question is on those.
What's going to happen to
my
the
question
people
is
that
on
tried
those
to burn
rioters who assaulted
Excuse me.
officers.
You have to
Would
answer.
you pardon
What's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You
If
would
they're
pardon those-
innocent, If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
What does that mean? It's okay. The J6ers, will you pardon them? Absolutely. So you will if they're innocent. But I mean, a court of law found them not innocent. If they weren't innocent, then they would have been found innocent, presumably, unless he's got some like big, like Donald Trump played like Ace Attorney in the Capitol building, finding evidence to crack the case, show that they actually didn't break in or something. I don't know. Did Donald Trump pass the bar exam?
By the way, the Supreme Court just well, they were convicted by a very tough system. How come the people that tried to burn down Minneapolis, how come the people that took over a large percentage of Seattle, how come nothing happened to them? How come the people...
Actually, a lot of people got arrested and tried. They just got tried with different charges, and it's been a very long time.
Sir, we're talking about
How
people
come
that
the
were
people-
seen
No, no,
beating
no. We're
officers
talking
with
about federal
flagpoles,
buildings.
dragging them down the stairs. They're on video. Have you seen that
Really?
video,
Oh,
sir?
really? Well, they
you would
shot-
pardon those. You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. You know, nobody died that day. You do know that.
Are they talking about Ashley Babbitt? Is that who he's referring to? Was Ashley Babbitt shot in the face? I thought she was shot in the chest. I don't remember.
But people died in Seattle. Nobody died, but people died in
140
Minneapolis.
officers
You know
were
people died in
assaulted that
Minneapolis.
day.
And nothing happens, and nobody ever talks, and nothing happens to those people. But you went after the J6 people with a vengeance. And I'll tell you what about the cops that were, and I'm all for the police, as you know, but what about the police that are ushering everybody into the Capitol? Go in, go in, go in.
After they broke the windows and charged in, and Donald Trump was watching it, having a great time, sipping his Diet Coke, sitting on the couch, watching for 3 hours before saying for everybody to go home. It was after they broke in through the windows, and there wasn't any like crowd control to do at that point. All you could do was try to guide them to areas of the building where the congressman weren't, as they were still trying to evacuate. And so, yeah, doors were opened, but none of it has, like, that was after they had already broken in. The defenses were already crumbling. They were essentially abandoning their positions because they were no longer defensible.
What about that? Look,
No one. Was
nothing is perfect in life, but you have people from Minneapolis, you have people just from 5 days ago in Washington, D.C. They were having fistfights and fighting with the police. They were spraying and destroying. They were desecrating our monuments in Washington, D.C. 5 days ago, and nothing happened to them. And you can't have two systems of justice. That's why they went after me as a political opponent, because they felt they couldn't win without doing that. And we're going to win our cases, and we're going to be vindicated. But I have to spend a lot of time on that and money. That's what they want. After the election, they won't care. Although in my case, I think they probably will, because the hatred is pretty deep. But I'll tell you, they went after me as a political opponent. That's never happened in our country before, and it sets a terrible, terrible precedent.
What do you do on day one if you win? What's your first thing?
What do? I close the border. And I do two things, because I can do a lot of things simultaneously. I close the border. We don't want people coming in. We want people to come in, Harris, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. They have to come in legally. We want
Legal,
people. I want
yeah.
people to come into our country, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. So when you say, what do? That, and I drill, baby, drill. I bring energy way down. I bring interest rates down. I bring inflation way down, so people can buy bacon again. So people can buy.
I like the idea that there's like a slider in the White House, like the inflation slider. You just go like, oh, it's a little out of control. Let me just. Wah.
Ham sandwich again, so that people can go to a restaurant and afford it. Because right now, people can't buy food. Your grocery bills are up 40, 50, 60%, right? She's agreeing to me. Oh, she's agreeing. Thank you. I like you very much.
Mr. President, I think we are.
But it's true. Your grocery bills are up. And then they're mandating that you buy an all-electric car. You know, Elon Musk endorsed me, and he's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. He's a smart guy. But I'm against everybody having an electric car, okay? I'm very much against that. You have to be able to, if you want a hybrid or if you want a gasoline-propelled car. But, you know, we have more liquid gold, gasoline, oil, under our feet than any other country. More than Saudi Arabia, more than...
That's. I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure Venezuela is like. Don't they have the most? Don't they have the record? Which is pretty tragic considering their current circumstances, but pretty sure that's Venezuela.
Russia more than any other country. I want to use it. I want to use what we have. I want to bring down prices, bring down costs, and I also have to stop the invasion. And remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking your jobs.
Project 2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
The crowd is not receiving it well. So if you didn't hear that, listen to that again at the end.
Are taking your jobs.
Project
Mr. President,
2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
Well, Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, very much. Great
Thank you,
honor.
Mr. President.
So they said they had to shut it down by the Trump team. Trump was booked for an hour-long interview with these black journalists, and halfway through, the Trump campaign pulled the plug, told them to shut it down, shut down the interview, and then they scuttled him off the stage and he went home. I mean, this was, if some, I put disastrous in the title. I call this a disastrous interview in the title. And somebody in chat, I think they were timed out for a bit because they said something weird. I wasn't paying too much attention, but they were saying, Dylan, that's too biased. That's too biased of an interview title for this. Come on. The interviewers, the journalists they were activists, and they were certainly asking barbed questions. But if they're asking barbed questions and they're putting rakes in front of Trump, Trump is deciding to, in almost every instance, step on the rake or avoid the rake, craft his own rake, and then say Kamala Harris isn't black. Like, he is deciding to run straight into those barbs with no protection. And so can you really blame the journalist for just looking at the route he's going, placing the barbs in front of him, and watching him proceed to, jump on and stomp on the rake? Can't really blame it too much. And I mean, if it wasn't a disaster, if it was going good, they wouldn't have cut it off 30 minutes in. Just saying. Probably one of his worst interviews of this whole campaign season. Let's see if it can get any worse with less than 100 days to the election. 96, I think, at this point. 96 days. I'm not really a fan of Trump, but I think the vid was only 30 minutes because of the 30-minute delay at the start from tech problems. Maybe. I'm not sure. That could be possible. But also, Trump wasn't doing too good. It's hard to say. You know what? We'll put it up to interpretation. We'll leave a big question mark if it was the tech issues or not. But I don't know how much I buy it.